So here we are. It's hopefully getting toward the end of winter here in Indiana. We still got a good bit of snow on the ground. And today we're going to be tapping our maple trees to collect some sap to boil down to make syrup. So we've got two large sugar maples in the front yard, and then a smaller one over kind of by near where the kids play in the playground. So what we're going to do is tap these three trees, two on the two larger ones, and then one bucket on the smaller one to collect that sap. So we'll have 5 buckets in total. We'll collect that sap, fill those buckets up, and then just start the process of boiling it down to make maple syrup. All right, so here are the things you need. You don't need this, but we bought this to make it a little bit easier. It's just kind of a pre-assembled kit that's got taps for the tree itself. Some hose to help route it down into the buckets, and then they provided some cloth to help strain, but I bought some cheesecloth as well. But this is the tap. This is the part that goes into the tree. Oh, this is the part that the hose goes into, and then from there we got some food grade buckets to store the sap in while it's being collected. And then I got some lids. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the food grade lids that go with the bucket, so I ended up buying these lids, which I think will be fine for the time being. So you just run the hose from the tree into the bucket, and then it just comes out, fills up the bucket, and then you're ready to go. All right, so the instructions we have says you basically just size the location for the hole using the tube in the bucket. Like I said, we're going to tap these larger trees twice. So I'll likely just put this bucket here and then just figure out based on this where I can tap it. So probably about right there is good. It gives us enough to tap the tree and get the hose in the bucket. And then it says you just penetrate the tree, what did I say, 1.5 to 2 inches?
Yeah.
Yeah, 1.5 to 2 inches past the bark. And then a slightly upward angle. So we'll do that.
What is that? No, I don't know what.
And we just got over a really about 2 weeks of below freezing temperatures, so it may take some time for this tree to kind of catch up with the warmer temperatures and start producing the sap.
I have my own thing.
Just put this in there.
I wonder when it's gonna come out. I could put my bowl under that.
Where's the orange lids that I had? Ava, can you hand me that orange lid right there, please?
Yep. There you go.
What we'll do is
That's hard. You know I can just do it for you, Dad. I'm gonna put a hole in it. Well, that was quick.
take much, sis. Maybe come back a little bit for this. That's essentially it for the tree. So you tap it, and you run your hose from the tree into the bucket. That's it. Here's the buckets. As you can see, these three are pretty darn full, pretty much to the brim. And then these two really don't have a whole lot in them at all. That's from that tree that was the southernmost tree on the property. It didn't produce very much. So again, we're gonna put this in the fryer and boil it down and see what we get. What do you think, bud?
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool. Are you gonna be the one that watches it as it boils to make sure it doesn't get burnt? You don't know yet? We'll see. Today's the day that we're gonna be boiling the sap down. So just got a turkey fryer here. Got the pot, got the sap. We'll go ahead and get started here. Let's see, make sure my gas is open all the way. Yep. All right, so we got it lit. Now we just sit here and watch it boil. I probably come back and record some more once it is boiling and we get things going. So that's it though. Put the sap in there and let it boil. That should do it. So we got this stuff boiling now, and I guess the correct way to do this is to get a hydrometer that will read off the density of the sap, and then as it boils down and gets more dense, there's a range that it's supposed to be in for it to be good. Don't have one of those. I reached out to some people on a local maple website to ask them, if you're just doing this as a hobby or it's your first time, like, is there any easier ways you can do this without having to invest a bunch of money into it? And the general consensus was that the hydrometer would be the best route, but that, since water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, most people say like once the water starts boiling, it will only ever get to 212 degrees Fahrenheit unless you introduce something else to it, or like the water evaporates out and all you're left with is the sugar, at which point it will get warmer, which makes sense. So you'll watch the temperature, and then the last thing they mentioned was that typically when it's boiling, it'll be like a rolling boil, but then as the water evaporates off and it gets more dense like syrup, you'll have events where like it'll want to boil over. So when it gets to the point to where it goes from like a rolling boil to it's boiling over, that's a pretty good indicator that it's ready to get pulled off. And then, obviously, different people like their maple syrup to be different densities. And I guess, if you're doing this yourself, you can be really specific about it. I don't know that I really care at this point. It'd just be kind of interesting to see how this goes and how it turns out. So we'll let this run. It'll probably take all day to boil all this sap down. We'll see what it looks like. Hey everyone, so looks like we are done with the boiling phase now. Here's what it looks like. You can see it's not a lot. That was 18 gallons of liquid boiled down to what's probably 1.5 inches or 2 in the bottom of that pot. So we're gonna strain it, the cheesecloth here, and then let it cool and thicken up and see where it's at, and determine if it needs to be cooked more, if we're good. We're done boiling. We got it all done. Got it boiled down outside for the most part. And then when it was getting really, really close, and it was really hard to tell whether or not enough water had been evaporated out to get down to the actual like maple syrup part. And we didn't want to burn it, so we ended up pulling it off of the larger burner outside and brought it in here to the stove. But here's the final product. It turned out to be a very dark syrup, which I thought was kind of weird. With it being early season, my understanding was that most of the early season stuff comes out pretty light. But I think what happened was because we had the syrup in the bucket for a while, I guess with tree sap, in the late season you get dark syrup because the bacteria in the tree has all summer to grow. And the bacteria turns, I think, the fructose to glucose. And the glucose is what makes the darker syrup. So I think next time we'll probably boil the sap as we get it day to day, so that way we're not collecting a couple days worth and letting that bacteria grow. I don't think it's not a problem that I've seen having the bacteria in there. It just makes it a little bit darker. So you can see here again, turned out really well. It's very, very sweet. Much stronger than like the store maple syrup that you get, but not like too strong that it doesn't taste good. So that's it. This whole process was super simple. You tap the tree, you put the buckets down, you wait for the buckets to fill up, you put it in a pot, you boil it, and then when it gets down really, really close to where it's less runny and more, syrupy, you pull it off. You can finish it in the house or finish it outside depending on what you got. But it is very, very simple to do, and it was fun to do, something to experiment with, and we'll probably end up doing more next year. And I'd like to get out in the woods and maybe find some additional maple trees that we can tap out there and get a little bit more. We got 3 of these little jars and then 1 quart jar, so 18 gallons, to get this much maple syrup. It takes a lot of the sap to boil that water off to get to the syrup, so you don't get a whole lot out of it, but it certainly is delicious. So that's it. Thanks.